Hello, and welcome to part 2 of the pile optimization process. In part 1, we brought in our boundaries, our inclusion and exclusion zones, and now it's time to make our first layout. We're going to start by coming over here to the layout panel, and there's only one option right now, which is to create substation. So we're going to click on that, and it will place a substation right in the middle of our scene. We need to move that somewhere else. The way we'll do this is by selecting the substation and pressing T for transform. That brings up this gizmo. You can either move it on a X and Y axis like this, or if you press the blue square, you can free move it. So we'll tuck it in here for right now. And it is worth noting, if you need to make a second substation, if it's a very large project, you can hold down Control and drag away, and the new substation will drag away. But for right now, we only need the one. So to exit out of this, we're going to hit T again, and now our substation is placed. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come up here to the Layouts tab, and we're going to hit Selected Area. And this will be the area that we're placing trackers. Now, there are several ways you can do this. We can select from list, we can select by clicking on the scene, or we can even draw a new one. I personally prefer to select boundaries from list because I can just click this top all 11 boundaries or however many boundaries. And we do need to include the buildable area, the inclusion zones, as well as all the exclusion zones, so it knows what areas not to place. Okay, and we'll hit OK. The rest of these settings we're going to leave as default for now. Find max for total DC power, auto for blocks number, and so on. The only thing we're going to be concerned with right now is the solar arrays configuration. So you'll see here we have no alignment, maximize capacity selected, and under presets, we're just going to use whatever the generic tracker preset is, and we're going to hit OK. So now let's try running this with just these standard preset options selected, and we're going to see what we come up with. Now, it is worth noting that the first time you generate a layout, it may take a little extra time than usual. Okay, and here's what our first layout is going to look like. Now, if we start to look around, you're going to notice a few things that are maybe not very constructible. We have a few trackers that are just kind of stuck in odd places. And that is because under solar arrays, we have no alignment maximize capacity selected. So let's change that to align array rows. And right now you're going to notice under our total DC power, though it does give it in kilowatts, we can see that we have about 1.85 watts. So let's see how that is affected, because it is going to shrink our size slightly. Okay, and this is finished running, and you can see we don't have as many outliers. Our blocks are much more aligned now. It's much more of a constructible product. We do still have 1.85 gigawatts. It did go down maybe a couple hundred kW, but really not that much when you compare it to having a more constructible site. Now, that was just using the generic tracker, and what we want is to find the specific tracker type and length that's going to work best for our site. So let's go back to solar array configurations. See a few presets here that come out of the box with PV Farm. And in another video, I will show you how to make your own presets and adding them to the catalog right down here. Right now, for this project, let's use the NX Horizon. This is NX Horizon 6-string using 480 watt modules. And in this particular configuration, it is a 48 mod length. So we're going to start with the smallest, and we're going to add every potential length that we can have, which since it's a 6-string, these are all multiples of 6. And we're just going to add every preset option that is available to us. Now, this can be a little bit time consuming, but it really is the best way to narrow down what the best tracker lengths are going to be for your project. Okay, and once we have added the last one here, we're going to hit OK. And then we're going to generate this layout one more time using all these different trackers. Okay, and it's done running. So what the system has done is it's taken all these different tracker links and has put them in so that it can maximize and get as much in here as possible. If you look up at our total DC power, it is now increased. We're now at 1.9 gigawatts. But if you look over here, you see we have got blocks using literally every tracker length. Some even where we've got just a single 60 length, a single 66 length. So that's not exactly realistic to build this site. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to eliminate trackers that we don't necessarily need while keeping this number as high as we possibly can. The best way to do that is we're going to come over here to the property analysis panel. Now this is going to be usually over here on the left hand side right out of the box. You can come up here to these three dots and you can move it anywhere you want. You can even have it be floating. Personally, I prefer to keep it on my right hand side here, so I always have it handy along with my object details and my model explorer. So what the property analysis panel does is it will look for something in this scene, and anything that matches the property, it's going to give you a graph here. So we're going to go through this list of potential properties, and we're going to come right here, tracker frame, modules, module count X. And let's change that. Okay. So here we have this nice graph that tells us how many of each length we're using. So as you can see, overwhelmingly, we're using mostly 96s and then significantly less of all the rest of the lengths. And if we want a different view of that, we can come right up here to colorize objects. That will change every piece of equipment in here that matches this to that color. So since we have mostly 96 lengths, which is red, most of our scene here is red. But if you look, we do have this lighter green, which represents the 48s, the blue, which represents the 72s, and so on. And what you can do is you can click on the bars in this bar graph, and it will select everything in the scene that involves. So say we want the 72s, it selects those 72s for us. So now that we have a good idea of what the site looks like, we can start going down and whittling down until we have 2 or maybe 3 of the top trackers that are going to work for us on this site. So the first thing we notice, we've got a lot of 96s, not very many 90s. And I think if we've got the 96, we probably don't need the 90. So the first thing we can do is we're going to come up here to our solar array configurations and we're going to remove the 90 mod tracker configuration. Hit OK. And then we're going to run this generate layout again. All right, so we've removed the 90. Let's colorize these objects. Still definitely a lot of 96 trackers, but our distribution is getting a little bit better here. What we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to find whatever looks to be the lowest of these objects. So we definitely want to keep 84s. We've got almost about 150 of those. The rest are all in the 300s. So let's grab the 60s and let's grab the 54s and let's remove those and see how our DC power is affected. So remove the 54s, remove the 60s, hit OK. Again. And we're keeping an eye on what the total DC power is. We want it to go down too much as we remove these, and we know that it is going to go down a little bit, but we want to keep it up as high as possible. And we also want to keep track of the blocks. We would like more rational blocks with fewer trackers. So we definitely don't want the blocks to get out of control either. Okay, and with removing those, we're still at 1.91. So we are good to continue removing. Let's remove some of these smaller. Let's do the 66s, the 48s, and the 72s. And let's see what that gets us. 48, remove. And actually, let's leave the 72s for now. We don't want to remove too many all at once. So let's just do 2 removals, removing the 48s and removing the 66s. Generate layout. Okay, and that has finished generating. We'll colorize just for visualization. So this, our total DC power has taken a major hit here. We went from 1.91 to 1.88. So definitely something needs to come back in. And I'm guessing, since we've got these little empty spaces here, those shorter 48s were probably doing a lot of work filling out that DC power. So let's come over to our solar arrays and let's add those 48s back in. So NX Horizon 48, hit OK. And let's see if we can get back to what we had before. Okay, so that's finished running. And as I thought, some of those empty spaces are being filled in with the 48s now. We are back up to 1.909, almost 1.91, a little bit under, but much better than 1.88 that we had before. So we've got a top 5 here. So let's try to eliminate 2 more. So I'm thinking let's get rid of these 2 72 and 78 lengths, because those are the ones that we have the least amount of that I'm seeing right here. So let's remove these and see how much it affects our system. Remove 78 and remove 72. Okay, and that has run. We'll colorize one more time. And we are still at 1.90. So I think we can pretty safely say that we're going to go with the 48s, the 84s, and the 96s. Now, this is definitely something that you can play around with and try all different configurations. And this is a large site. Obviously, we're dealing with almost 2 gigawatts of power. So what we could do, like I showed you before, is duplicate this substation and have one substation for this boundary and one for this boundary, because what works best for this one might not necessarily work best for this one. But I want to keep all of it together so that we can really see the power of PV Farm and that it can handle these large scale systems. I think for our purposes, this is going to work the best. Of course, it is always a trade-off of trying to keep the highest DC power with the least amount of configurations. We could even add a 4th configuration if we wanted to fill some of those gaps in. We could bring one of those 70s or even the 54 back in. But I think for the purposes of this demonstration, let's go with our selected trackers being 48 length, 84 length, and 96 length. If we've got this colorized, if you want to go back to the way it was before, what we can do, we select the substation here and then come up to Edit, Scene, and Colorize Hierarchy. And it'll go back to the block view that we saw before. So this is going to be our layout configuration. And like I said, it is easy enough to bring things back in, try them out, try them in different configurations. The system will easily process that. So now that we've done the work of finding our top 3 trackers, we're going to come over here and we're going to save a version. So we're going to want to put in the description of the version what we have done. So we're going to say trackers 48, 84, 96, or we can even put trackers NX Horizon, just as specific as you want to get for your workflow. And then it is a good idea to put the system size. So we have 1.9 gigawatts, and we add that as a version. Okay, and now we can come back to that at any point in our process. So now we're ready to move on to step 3.